Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2 3.
Welcome to the first episode of The Pulse of Humanity. My name is David Olvera, your host. Today, my buddy here, Brian. Brian, what's your last name?
Osbourne.
Brian Osbourne. He owns a music and movie store here in Stanton, Texas. So welcome to the show, man.
Well, thanks for having me on.
All right. So first of all, Brian, why Stanton?
Well, a long time ago, Big Spring used to have a pretty big, cool record store, and everybody liked to go there. So I decided to move one here in Stanton just to be a little different.
Huh? Yeah. I first heard of this store when I'm a home health nurse, so I went to go see one of my patients I was on call that weekend, and this old man, he had like 7, 8 stereos, the turntables. And I asked him if he would sell me one, and he's like, "No, they're not for sale. But go tell that kid down the street on St. Peter. He opened up a music store." I hadn't heard of it, so I asked him where it was at. I drove by here. You were closed. It was a Sunday. You were closed. So yeah, that's how I first heard of you. And but I was like, when I saw you, I was like, well, this guy must be from California. he doesn't fit in here in Stanton. You know, it's a very conservative town. So how's business? Do you get a lot of business here?
We've been here coming up on 3 years in August, and we've really done really well.
Okay.
And we expect to do even better this year. But the supply and demand is really hard to come by in this area.
Yeah. Well, I saw your Facebook page, and you have a lot of good reviews. So I know you get a lot of business, but it's mainly from out of town, huh? People.
A lot of people from the Midland, Odessa, Big Spring, San Angelo, Dallas. Some people just traveling through, and they drive down the main street and they stopped by, and they were like from Virginia and stuff like that. So they came in and bought a few things. And
that's cool.
then some of the younger kids in this town, their parents used to listen to some of the records I have, so they've bought them like record players for Christmas or birthday, and they come in and they want to buy their first record, so they come in here.
Right. So what all do you sell? Like, what are your best sellers? Or I see some cups here.
Well, I sell a little bit of memorabilia. If you can see it behind us, we got some wall art, different things. But I sell a lot of different memorabilia. Like I got some Jimi Hendrix teddy bears, got some Grateful Dead bears. I got some Beatle coffee cups, drinking cups, Grateful Dead shot glasses, other band shot glasses.
Right.
And I have not a lot, but I do have a few band T-shirts of different bands that range from Pink Floyd to some of the newer heavy metal stuff like At the Gates, bands like that. And
so is it just strictly rock, or?
Well, I cater basically to the rock music, but I do have music from like all the way back when my grandmother was a teenager dancing her boogie woogie with Guy Lombardo. But now, I do have current stuff all the way up to today mixed in there. But some of my most popular stuff is some of my section I call the odds in out section. And it's stuff I import from Europe. And it comes a variety of different bands like Pink Floyd, Black Sabbath, Metallica, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles.
Right. Yeah, I see a lot of Beatles stuff around here.
Yeah, they're not my favorite, but my favorite band is Black Sabbath, and will always be.
Okay, cool. So so we know Brian. If you ask around, Brian, they know he's the store owner. But this show is called The Pulse of Humanity. So I want to get to know my guest on a deeper level. So let's go to 8-year-old Brian. Where were you born, Brian? And just tell us about your childhood.
Well, I was born overseas to American parents that brought me over here to the United States. Originally, when we first got here, was Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And
Tulsa.
so I was about an infant, and then we lived there off and on for a long time in some of the surrounding little towns, and I was just seeing all these hippies that were standing out on my street corners selling carnations, and they were always playing music and seemed like they were really cool and everything. This is around 68. So I thought I'd be cool and start hanging around them too.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is the product of hanging around them. People criticize me for my long hair, and I say, hey, Jesus had long hair too. So.
Okay, so I understand you were in a couple of bands growing up.
Well, I helped a lot of bands do a lot of things. I helped do some vocals here and there. I did a lot of soundboard for them, and a lot of bands that people probably like today.
Can you tell us which bands you played with? Is there any popular bands you hung around with?
Some of the bands that when I was working here in Midland and Odessa, they went a band called Lust, and another band. We all hooked up, and there were people like members of Metallica before they were Metallica and stuff like that all around. And a lot of these other 80s bands, they were just now getting on the scene, and they would come around, and I'd kind of help them out a little bit here and there.
Yeah, okay. So what was your most memorable like rock and roll moment? The craziest story you have, you know?
I guess when I was...
there must be several, but one that sticks out.
The one that sticks out the most is when I saw Jimi Hendrix a week before my 10th birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And my parents were so nice and got me tickets to go see him for my birthday because they wouldn't let me go to Woodstock the year before, so because I was only 9, and they didn't like that. And I was glad I got to see him because this was his last tour in the United States he was on before he went to Europe and played the Isle of Wight show, and then a few weeks later he was gone. So I got lucky to see him before he passed. And the most memorable point is standing there watching him just play his guitar, doing his antics and stuff, and he started playing his guitar real heavy and shaking it, and I kind of felt something hit me, and I guess he sweated on me. So I thought, oh wow, I got sweated on by Jimi Hendrix.
Cool.
And then I met Ozzy Osbourne in Midland in 1978. You know, stuff which was pretty cool.
Was that after his bat incident?
This is long before.
This
is still with Black Sabbath.
Oh, okay.
It was their last tour. They were in the Chaparral Center playing opening act with Van Halen.
Wow. So Odessa had
They used to have a bunch of good concerts in there. I mean, Odessa was always a good place. Midland did too. Then they just quit.
Huh.
You know, I guess I scared them all off, or somebody scared them all off.
So, it seems like you've always been interested in since you were a child in music. So, is that what you've always wanted to do? Was there anything at a certain point in your life that you wanted to be, like, say, a doctor or whatever?
Well, never
was
did.
it always music?
Never much like a doctor, but I did want to try to play football when I was younger because my dad played football, but I just didn't have the body for it. I had the size and everything, but I just didn't have the body that would stay healthy enough to maintain a longevity in that sport. But around the time before that, I had cousins, and like I said, these hippies, they were listening to all kinds of colorful music, and I started getting into all kinds of stuff. I started listening to Jimi Hendrix when I was like 7. And it's when I first heard his first album. It was like when it first came out, Are You Experienced? And I've always loved him more than any musician, but time progressed, and then I started getting into the heavier side of music, and that's when I discovered Black Sabbath about a couple months before Jimi Hendrix passed away. And I've always had music that's helped me out with a lot of things that I couldn't find through friends or family. I'd have questions, and I'd play an album or something, and a song would come on, and the answer would be on the album or something like that. So as Jim Morrison once said, music is your friend, your only friend until the end.
Right.
I don't believe that in a way because I have a beautiful, beautiful wife that supports me very much. But music's second next to her in my life.
Yeah, okay. So tell me, your 3 favorite rock albums.
My first favorite rock album is Animals by Pink Floyd. That's my favorite rock and roll album of all
Was there
time.
like what song was on that album?
A song called Dogs.
Dogs.
I've noticed whenever they ask that on Facebook, a lot of people say Dogs. So there's a lot of people that were going through emotional and understanding what was going on. This came out when I was 16, and I was just having all kinds of strange occurrences going on in my life between listening to music, chasing girls, family, and that album more or less just gave me the encouragement to keep going on.
Okay.
And then I guess my second favorite album would be, boy, there's so many of them. My wife says I have too many favorite records. Let's see. Well, I guess you would have to say Paranoid. No, wait, take that back. Bloody Sabbath.
Bloody Sabbath.
Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. That's my second favorite album of all time. It really should be my number one because it's really, since Black Sabbath is my favorite band, it seems like that should be number one because that album is from start to finish. It's just a masterpiece, and they were really going into an experimental stage in their music, and it was really sounding a little different what direction they were before the first four, which was really great, but this one just kind of showed their talent. And it kind of, and there's a few songs on there that just hit home, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy how a band can. I was watching a documentary on Def Leppard, and they were struggling to get a hit album, and when they came out with Hysteria, just how they came out with it, it was crazy. It's awesome the way they
I always thought Def Leppard always was a very good band.
Yeah,
especially when they first came out. I saw them in Odessa and the Chaparral Center in Midland, and they were just a bunch of kids up there, but they sure blew the headliner off.
Right.
You know, really.
Well, you know, Def Leppard. I never really liked Def Leppard. I think Hysteria came out in 87, 88. There. So at that time, around the same time, Poison came out with
Talk Dirty to Me.
Yeah.
I that's one band I can't stand is Poison.
I like the Poison album better and all my friends liked the Hysteria, and I was like, I guess I just want to be different. But I like CC, the guitarist guy. What's his name?
CC DeVille.
DeVille. Yeah, I thought
he could have been different and still like Def Leppard better because Poison. There's a lot of people who don't. I think they're overrated, and people don't like me because I'd say Led Zeppelin's overrated. Right. You know, and they're not even my top 15 favorite bands. Right. But I got all their records that I want by them. That I would, if I was marooned somewhere, I'd have them.
Speaking of overrated, that was my next question. Which band do you think is the most overrated and underrated?
The most overrated band, Led Zeppelin.
Zeppelin.
Scout's Honor. And underrated. I would say Never Say Die or Techno Ecstasy by Black Sabbath. People don't realize those two albums came out at the peak of disco. And disco was really going on, so there wasn't much taste in America for the heavier side of music. Right. So they made a heavy sound, but they kind of had that, tried to add a little disco flavor to it.
Well, kind of like, I think Queen did the same thing, huh?
You could say that, yeah. They bended into that.
Well, I guess a lot of bands did, but that's another.
Rolling Stones in '78, when disco was real big, they did Some Girls I Tell Everybody. That's their disco record. Right. Same way with Kiss, you know, their album Dynasty. That was definitely a heavy disco album, you know. A lot of my friends like that album too.
Kiss is the most overrated band. I feel that.
I don't really call them overrated. Because, I mean, they're definitely better musicians than most because they can play their instruments. They can play guitar better than you. They can play better than me. But Kiss isn't all about pleasing people with their music. Their stage show.
Right, yes.
And Gene Simmons has shown you perfect how good an American businessman can be and make money besides being in the music business.
Well, you know, I was watching, I think it was a podcast documentary about Kiss?
It was called Hype and Glory.
And they weren't even playing their instrument. That's what they were saying, that they never played their instruments. It was all like a show. Or something.
Oh, that sort of Mello Vanilli like.
Yeah, kind of.
They said that about other bands that I've heard. Oh, by the way, my third favorite band is Deep Purple.
Deep Purple.
And my two favorite individual artists is Jimi Hendrix and Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa's the best.
Huh. Cool. So, okay, I've been asking I've asked this question since I was a kid, and no one's been able to answer. Maybe you can. So, okay, 3 songs pop out that this happened with. It's Whitesnake's Here I Go Again, Warrant's Heaven, and another one. It's a band. It's Take That. Is that what they're called?
What about that song Here I Go Again? What's wrong with it?
Well, let me get back to Take That. Back for Good. That song, Back for Good. You probably it's like a bubblegum type song.
I've never heard it.
But especially Whitesnake song. When I first heard it on the radio, it was like such a badass song. Like, oh man, this song, I need to get this cassette. This is cassette back in the day. So when I got the cassette, I put that damn thing on, and the original song was way different than the radio mix. Why the heck do they do that?
I have no idea. They did that on the album that it came out on was called Saints and Sinners. And it was released in 82.
Was this Whitesnake?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was originally released in 82. And it used to, like it used to say, like a hobo, I was born to walk alone.
Yeah.
And some reason they changed it to Drifter. And then another song on that album called, God, it just slipped my mind.
Well, but back
There's
in
3
the
songs
day,
on that album that they did on that same album in 82 and put on that album in 87. But they made it, I guess they wanted to be more flashy and more heavy and glamish at the same time.
yeah, like the radio mix was always different than the original. Like when I got the Warrant cassette too, and I played that song Heaven, it's like totally different. Like, it just pissed me off. Like, and I asked my wife the other day.
I know they had to cut it down for airplay.
Well, I asked my wife if she knew the difference, and she's like, no, I'd never even noticed. But I got on YouTube and I played the radio mix, and then I played the original, and it's totally, the tempo's different, and just I don't know.
Well,
and I would think that the radio mix would be on the cassette because it is a better version of it.
Is that the one you had that said, like a hobo, I was born to walk alone, or was like a drifter, I was born to walk alone?
Yeah, it says Drifter, but it's just the way it's played, like the tempo, the guitar and everything.
It's probably just an edited version for radio play.
Keyboards and everything. It's just totally different.
Yeah, but when I'm talking
Y'all
about...
check it out. Go look on the YouTube and get the radio mix and the original, and you'll see just a big difference.
Well, the original one came out in 82, and instead of saying like a drifter, I was born to walk alone, it's like a hobo. I was born to walk alone.
I don't think I've heard that one.
You can find it on YouTube also. On the album, Snakebite, I think.
Snakebite.
They have but I think it was just the time and era that they just wanted, and they were real, like the 80s bands, all flashy and stuff like that. Instead, when Whitesnake came out, they're the band, they helped me recover from Deep Purple breaking up because they had 2 original members of Deep Purple, and some of their songs had that flavor, and they had that ballads and that message that I needed as a kid. It came out when I was like 16, 14, 15, and they had certain songs on there that I could relate to keep me going forward, instead of parents say, do this, and instead the album would say, do this. So.
In the 90s, because I love 80s music, like all the pop music, the rock, especially rock, that's what I grew up on. But then the 90s came, and the music just sucked. Everything. Even now, I'd go back, and that's when I started getting into, I guess, Depeche Mode.
Depeche Mode.
That kind of music, that was good. But the rock music, I think, sucked.
Well, see, some people say music. There's not any really good music stuff there. I found a band that came out in '94 that's just now really getting big in the United States that I liked a lot. They were called Within Temptation, a band called Nightwish, Serenia. They were more like, they call it melodic, or some people even call it gothic music, but some of the music behind that music is words and everything is really good.
Well, I know Duran Duran came out with something in the 90s, and that was pretty good.
They were out in the 80s and 90s. I didn't like any of that.
You didn't like Duran Duran?
Like, I had a friend, bless his soul, George Reed. He liked all kinds of music, but back in 80, he'd come over and he'd say, hey, listen to this band, and it would be like a band called XTC. Or he liked the Public Image and stuff like that. Some of this that were spun off a lot of these punk rock bands, but now they were more getting into the mainstream, and that's where you got that stuff like Depeche Mode and stuff, and In Excess and all that.
Yeah.
And that what they called it what was the name of that? They called it alternative.
Alternative.
Billy Joel put it the best. It's all rock and roll.
Right. Yeah.
But I liked some of it, but I didn't really. But I stuck to my roots. Like today, if I'm going to go play a record, I'd go put on a Black Sabbath record before I'd put on a Depeche Mode record, unless it's to sell the record or something like that, But people say, well, that's old stuff. And I say, well, you put it on, and it's 40 years old, but it sounds as good as it did when I first heard it.
Yeah. And like I never got into rap either. Like, my favorite rapper is Tupac, but I don't like his music. I just like the lyrics, the way he
presents it.
Yeah, the way
the story. Well, see, that's what I like about Frank
music,
Zappa.
I don't like just the words.
That's what I like about Frank Zappa. He was one of the very first rappers that he was singing rap music back in the 60s and 70s, but you can't really classify his music as rap either, because it doesn't even have a genre except what people who get it, they call it zapped. And he has a song that's very much a rap, but then it'll get real funky like a funk, and then before you know it, it sounds like it's something right out of a Benny Goodman album. You hear xylophones and some out-of-tune saxophones, but everything has its place.
Right. Well, what's that song? That band had played that song, Epic, I think.
Faith No More.
Faith No More. Yeah, because it's kind of like rap, rock. So I like that. Because I just love the guitar. Right. If it has guitar in it, I like it.
Well, like this
just
band,
straight rap,
the band Anthrax, back when they had really put out they're considered, right there with Metallica, forthcoming with that kind of music.
Yeah.
And they ventured off and started playing with bands like Public Image and doing their own rap songs and stuff like that too in the late 80s and stuff like that. And I really kind of didn't like it as much because rap only rhymes with what I think it rhymes with, but you're right about Tupac, and there are people that put out some very good, interesting lyrics, but now it's just like it's all about money and sleazy girls, and I mean it's always been about that, but this stuff they're putting out today that the kids listen to, they call it really good tunes, and it's just.
I know, my son, he puts on some music and I'm like, gosh, this is crap. There's it's just, like you said, it's about sex, drugs. And we had the same thing growing up, but I always drifted more to the deep stuff,
Like Whitesnake's a very sexually oriented band just by their name.
Whitesnake what?
Is a very sexually oriented band with their music and their name.
Right.
And their lyrics but they don't sit there and just blatantly say the words like the words do today. They use the words like the F word and a lot of F bombs here often. And I don't understand how they sit there just cutting each other and calling them that word that people are being called racist for using. But if they don't like to be called that, why let their entertainers degrade them then? I don't understand that, but I guess that's how they get their point across to each other. I don't know. I think we're all just people. We're just happen to be born white, black, green, yellow, but we still got the same God.
Right. There's only one.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's,
there's one that wants to be, but he's under him, so.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of these people seem to praise more in their music and more. People used to criticize, well, Black Sabbath, just by the name, you can tell they're devil worshippers. I really think they're one of the very first Christian bands.
You think so?
Well,
why do you say that?
Well, there's a song that they wrote in '71, and it's called After Forever. Check that out and check the lyrics out. Where in a lyric would you think a devil worshiper would write, "Are you afraid what your friends might say when you believe in God above?" And it says, when can they realize when God is the only way to love? Why would a devil worshiper say that, He'd be damning God instead of uplifting them in their music. And sure, their songs have a lot of gloom and doom because they see what's going on in this world. Prime example, killing yourself to live. That doesn't sound like you're just going to kill yourself just to live, but what do you do when you slave at a dead-end job?
Yeah.
Or you're just barely making ends meet. You're just working yourself to death, so you're killing yourself to live. And the lyrics all talk about that, you know.
Oh, I need to check that out. I'm not really a big Black Sabbath fan, but...
Yeah, like the kill yourself to live. It says, you look around the world, what do you see? Pain, suffering, and misery. That's not the way the world was meant. It's a pity you don't understand.
Yeah, some can get really deep. And people just, they don't even get it, you know?
And then some people use words, and Led Zeppelin said the best on Stairway to Heaven, words have two meanings, so that's where they twist it and say, well, they really means the devil instead of God.
Right.
But just look how they write the lyrics out. If the lyrics are written out, they put a little g, they're talking about the little God, the one that doesn't matter. And then when they talk about the main God with the big G, that's how you can tell who's talking about the big God, you know.
Right. So yeah, that can be a whole other podcast talk about the religion.
How it mixes in. Yeah, we could do that another time.
Another time we can go deep into that.
Yeah, we don't. Politics and religion don't work too well right now.
Right. So your all-time like rock music. Well, let me reword it. The most influential rock bands of all time that have changed the world. Is there any rock band that's done that?
Well, of course, Black Sabbath, you know.
Black Sabbath.
And then, but Pink Floyd, they've evolved it from what they were when they first came out compared to what they turned out to be. And
I think it's the Beatles.
They introduced the world to pop music, you know, like Michael Jackson music and stuff like that.
It was like considered hard back in the day, wasn't it? Like it was.
Well, people called it aggressive, but it's more popish, like Madonna or Michael Jackson or stuff like that.
Well, they started off with.
Well, I mean, they came out. All they did is just say, "Hey, let's get a band together." Because look, Buddy Holly started it all with the bands, and then when they came out, they kind of sounded like what Buddy Holly may have sounded like. We don't know because he didn't live. Because the music was changing from the stuff like Hound Dog and Tutti Frutti and all that stuff. Right. But then when it pushed it into the '60s, it was more like, hey, let's start a band. There's more bands because most of them are just individual singers and performers, and a lot of them didn't even write their own music, but they did have some people behind them. But the Beatles, to me, and the Rolling Stones, right there too.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary.
That's my fourth favorite band,
the Rolling Stones. Yeah, on the Beatles, and they changed the world.
Yeah, they changed how people would perceive how things could be said and done. Yeah, but Jimi Hendrix took it, and the Doors and all them people in the late '60s took it a step further. And then after those guys started, dying off, and the music got pushed into the '70s, and it was for years the heavier sound like the Led Zeppelins, the Black Sabbath. They were the big bands on the scene. Deep Purple. I'm missing a few, in there between that were pretty heavy and influential. There's other bands that were popish that were like the Beatles that never got much mention in the United States, like the Poppy Family. They were really good.
Yeah, I think say the Monkees, and they were just trying to.
They weren't doing nothing. I heard they weren't even a real band.
Right.
They were supposed to be at this Hendrix show that I was at, but I didn't get to see them. They didn't show up because I heard they weren't really. They were the Milli Vanilli for their time. Yeah. That's what I heard. And Mike Nesmith is the only real musician in the whole band. And the bass player Peter Tork, I think he just passed away here a couple months back, or about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But they really groomed us for the MT generation with the Monkees.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And then they tried to give us other pop bands on television, like the Brady Bunch and stuff like that. It's crazy. Cow Seals.
So, one more question, Brian. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't touch on?
Oh, I do sell lots of records.
Yeah, he's got thousands of records in here.
Yep.
So you guys come
and CDs.
Yeah, CD. Cassette. You have any cassettes?
I just found a bag that has about maybe 50 in it, but they're mostly pre-recorded. So.
Okay.
No, I don't really mess with cassettes. I do have a few 8-tracks because people kind of like them for novelty items and stuff.
Yeah.
I've sold them as one for $1, one for $5, just whatever I pop off, and they'll cough it up.
Right.
But you know, I got all kinds of records all the way from, like I said, from the early 1920s to today.
Okay. Yeah. So y'all come check him out. If he doesn't have something in stock, you can get it from his vendors, right? Is that correct?
If they're able to get it, but I always find it through other people.
Yeah.
That buy 3 or 4 copies of one record just so they can buy, sell, and trade.
Awesome.
Yep.
So, all right, Brian. Well, thank you for your time, sir. We'll have to do this again sometime.
All right.
And I still want to buy that Abbey Road sign up there. But
My wife left and I didn't get to ask her.
oh man, okay. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Tune in for my other episodes. We'll have some more interesting guys like this gentleman here. Peace out.